Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're confronting a crucible of historical reality. We're going to analytically dissect the profound strategic and theoretical crisis of the Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, the KPD, in the immediate aftermath of January 1919. The violent suppression of the German Revolution by the Freikorps wasn't just a defeat. It marked a definitive, structural turning point in the European class struggle. In our analysis today, we'll operate with the utmost academic rigor. We are going to utilize the precise terminology of the revolutionary cadres of the era to understand exactly how inescapable geopolitical forces necessitated a painful and ultimately deeply divisive strategic retreat.
We will chart this structural syllabus through 6 distinct phases: capital and the Weimar coalition, the humiliation of Versailles, Brest-Litovsk versus Versailles, assessing the Ebbing Revolution, the strategy of Levi and Radek, and finally, the Heidelberg Congress split.
Let's begin with our first section, capital and the Weimar coalition. Observe the rapid, chronological sequence of events throughout 1919 that fundamentally defined this period of revolutionary ebb. Time was moving with ruthless speed. The year opened with the Constituent Assembly elections in January, which was followed swiftly by the formation of the SPD-led governing coalition in February. By May, we see an initial, highly performative refusal of the Versailles terms, inevitably culminating in their signing by June. This relentless compression of historical time forced the KPD to undergo a severe internal reckoning, and that reckoning ultimately came to a head at the Heidelberg Congress in October. When we examine the financial architecture of the nascent republic, the direct mapping between corporate entities and the bourgeois parties they financed is undeniable. You have Walter Rathenau of AEG and Siemens backing the Democrats. Deutsche Bank and Krupp are actively funding the far-right nationalists. Hugo Stinnes is financing the People's Party. The KPD correctly analyzed that the barons of heavy capital were in reality the true masters of Germany. These industrialists dictated their conditions to a parliamentary coalition that frankly had no alternative but to bow before them. All the while, the mass of the German people paid for the crushing cost of the imperialist war. To truly grasp the sheer scale of this financial intervention, just consider this figure: 30 million marks. That was the contribution from just the 4 major banks to the election funds of the bourgeois political forces. This wasn't mere lobbying, it was the outright purchase and steering of the state apparatus by the capitalist class during a moment of acute systemic vulnerability.
This brings us to Section 2, the humiliation of Versailles. We see the initial and ultimately futile bourgeois resistance to the treaty perfectly encapsulated by Chancellor Philipp Scheidmann. He indignantly decried the terms as a terrible shirt of Nessus, declaring, "May the hand wither that chains itself and us with these shackles." Yet, faced with the absolute inflexibility of foreign imperialism, this posturing collapsed almost instantly. Scheidmann resigned, and the majority Social Democrats inevitably capitulated. They signed the treaty in the very Hall of Mirrors where the German Reich was originally founded. For the KPD and the Communist International, this treaty was strictly and accurately analyzed as an expression of raw imperialist brigandage. It was merely a continuation of the World War's predatory aims by other means. Furthermore, the communists argued that this punitive peace inherently strengthened domestic reactionary forces. It fueled pan-Germanist revanchism and provided highly fertile ground for the devastating stab-in-the-back myth directed against the revolutionary proletariat.
Moving to Section 3, Brest-Litovsk versus Versailles. The KPD's analytical posture here required a rigorous juxtaposition of structural geopolitical realities. The Independent Social Democrats, the USPD, attempted to justify signing Versailles by comparing it to Lenin's signing of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918. The KPD systematically dismantled this false equivalence. The Russian context involved a victorious armed proletariat deliberately accepting an infinitely humiliating peace simply to buy a necessary respite, keeping their revolutionary citadel intact. Conversely, the German context involved a disarmed minority proletariat. For Germany to sign Versailles was to accept a truce strictly to the advantage of the German counter-revolution. It allowed imperialism to consolidate its forces against the impending world revolution. We advance now to Section 4, assessing the Ebbing Revolution.
It is absolutely vital that we grasp this specific definition, the ebb of the revolutionary wave. Following the targeted assassinations of its core leadership, Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Liebknecht, and Leo Jogiches, the KPD was forced to confront a brutally harsh strategic reality. The historical phase was shifting. Retreating struggles meant the illusion of a simultaneously, immediately rising world revolution had to be abandoned. It had to be replaced by a protracted, long-term strategy for party development. Stepping into this immense leadership void was Paul Levi, a refined intellectual and a close associate of both Luxemburg and Lenin. Levi recognized that the party majority was deeply infected with a highly dangerous extremism. His foundational objective was to combat these pushist and Blanquist adventures, this impatient, undisciplined desire to seize power without mass support. He needed to firmly reorient the party toward disciplined, long-term organizational work, which meant utilizing both parliamentary platforms and trade unions.
This leads us directly into Section 5, Levi, Radek, and Strategy. Writing from prison, Karl Radek rigorously deconstructed exactly why mechanically transposing the Russian October experience onto Western Europe was a fatal strategic error. Consider these stark material disparities. First, you have the immense relative strength and entrenchment of the Western bourgeoisie compared to the fragile Russian state. Second, the deeply property-owning spirit of European peasants stood in sharp contrast to the revolutionary Russian peasantry. Third, we must acknowledge the advanced imperialist corruption of the Western labor aristocracy. And finally, the brutal reality of force. The Russian proletariat seized power while armed during a war. The Western proletariat had been systematically disarmed through demobilization, all while the bourgeoisie deployed heavily armed mercenary Freikorps to subjugate them. This structural analysis culminates in Radek's strategic imperative, and it's a powerful one. Think in terms of continents and centuries. This is the Communist International's appeal to the proletariat. This perfectly encapsulates the KPD's necessary paradigm shift. The victory of the proletariat was never going to be a single, decisive blow. It would be an extremely slow process across continents, demanding a highly deliberate, protracted international struggle where defeats and victories would inevitably alternate. Finally, we reach Section 6, the Heidelberg Congress split. We must trace the precise, calculated steps Levi took to definitively purge the party of its autonomous, impatient wing. At the Heidelberg Congress, Step 1, Levi presented his Theses on Communist Principles. These demanded a strict recognition of the ebbing wave and the absolute necessity of long-term struggle over putschism. Step 2, the extremist faction, driven by its autonomous impatience, flatly refused to submit to party discipline. Step 3, recognizing the absolute theoretical incompatibility of these tendencies, Levi expelled the faction. This was a severe amputation. It halved the party membership, completely gutting crucial strongholds like Berlin and Hamburg. The expelled elements subsequently formed the anti-parliamentary KPD. It is crucial, however, to examine the reaction of the broader international. While Lenin and Radek completely shared Levi's theoretical position regarding the necessity of a long-term strategy, they viewed the drastic expulsion as a tactical misstep. Lenin communicated that while a split may have been inevitable down the line, expelling young, gifted, albeit inexperienced propagandists in this manner was excessive. He urged the restoration of unity, firmly arguing that ideological differences should have been resolved through sustained mediation and debate, rather than immediate administrative severing.
We conclude our explainer today by confronting a fundamental theoretical contradiction. In periods of political ebb, when the revolutionary wave visibly and undeniably recedes, is the schism between maintaining immediate revolutionary impatience and adopting a pragmatic, gradualist, long-term strategy an inevitable tragedy of historical materialism? As you digest these severe lessons from 1919, I urge you to critically evaluate this. Can a vanguard ever truly maintain unity when objective conditions dictate a retreat? Or does the crucible of reality always demand a painful ideological purification? Thank you for your rigorous attention to this analysis.